So welcome once again. Let's start by making some clarification about what this training is about. So this training is designed for content creators. We received self-nomination from over 2,000 content creators, but this platform can only take about 1,000 at a time. So we have a little over 1,000 people registered for this webinar today. The purpose of this session is to help you understand better the fundamentals of the new tax laws. Similar to the way we had engagement and we continue to have engagement with several stakeholder groups we've had with manufacturers, we've had with investors, we've had with publishers and editors and reporters of traditional media. We've had with small businesses, Nigerians in the diaspora. So the same way we believe that the content creator community are a very important group. One, because they are Nigerians and they will be impacted themselves. And two, they also educate other people. So the training will provide you with facts and accurate information about the major changes to the tax law, and it will give you the opportunity for your questions to be answered. You have shared many questions with us. We've tried to collate the most frequently asked one, about 20 of them, that we'll try and address in the course of the training today. So what are the benefits of attending this program today? You gain understanding of how the tax reforms would affect you and the benefits that are there for you under the tax laws. You would also be in a better position should you wish to educate your followers, and you'll be able to identify some misinformation that is all over the place, as well as know where to find credible information should you want to verify any data. At the end of this training, based on participation at this training and the number of followers, we would identify the top 50 content creators based on the number of followers if they have attended the training. Let me also clarify what this training is not about. So the purpose of this session today is not to engage you to be able to create content or to support the reform. So the intention here is not to ask you to create content for the reform or to promote or support the reform. If you wish to do that, it's entirely at your discretion, the same way you normally do when you create your content to educate your followers. So there is no payment to anyone of any kind for attending this session, so we will not pay any amount. Because like I said, we've had engagement with more than 40 different groups. So we don't pay people to attend. This is just public service, and we are trying to educate Nigerians and also to take their feedback on the reform and how it should be implemented in the best interest of everyone. So having said that, it means that if you continue with this webinar from this point forward, it means that you are in agreement that you will not be paid for this, and we are not asking you to promote the reform. All right. So the outline that we will cover today in about 1.5 hours to 2 hours is first to provide the economic context and pre-reform reality. So where are we? So that we know what challenges we have that we're trying to address. What are the core reform principles and objectives? And what are the common myths, misinformation, and what are the facts, as well as conclusion and final thoughts. So let's start with the economic context and pre-reform reality. So this government has embarked on a number of reforms. Many of those reforms have come with significant amounts of sacrifices and economic pain and hardship for many of our citizens. including the subsidy removal on PMS that led to increase in transportation costs, logistics, and fuel, part of the inflation we have dealt with in the past couple of years, as well as Naira flotation. While these reforms were addressing significant economic, decline, they came with those sacrifices. Whereas the tax reform law, on the other hand, is coming to provide solutions to many of the long age-old problems that we've had with the system, to protect the vulnerable, and also to give the small business owners the space to grow and breed, while the large businesses are also not left behind. It's very easy for people to oversimplify economic management and policy reforms by simply just saying to you, is your life better today than before? Nigeria was better in 2023 May. You should have just left us alone. So I like to speak to facts. So if you look at this slide, you will see as of May 2023, the major indicators were amber, waiting to turn red. If you look at traffic light colors. So one of it is external position, which is really Nigeria's external reserve, trade deficit. We had multiple exchange rate windows. Our net reserve was barely $4 billion. We're owing more than 7 billion FX forward. Many of us will remember we could no longer use our Naira cards to even pay for subscription or apps. Even as little as $20, we couldn't pay on our cards. We had the likes of Emirates stop flying to Nigeria because Nigeria became the most indebted to international airlines because they couldn't take their money out. And Emirates, for example, thought, what's the point of doing business? You earn Naira that you can't spend, and you can't get the dollar to go out of the country to your own country. The country's revenue position became very, very dire. Revenue was low, and the government was spending about almost 100% of its revenue to service debts. Because government wasn't generating enough revenue, government resorted into printing of Naira to spend. Over 22 trillion Naira was printed, with accumulated interest of over 7 trillion Naira. Total about 30 trillion was printed. When you print money to spend, it will create inflation because the value of the money in your hand, in your pocket, and in your wallet, and in your bank account will fall because of the money that has been printed. So this is what we sometimes call inflation tax. So the 10 Naira you have that is worth 10 Naira today is still 10 Naira, but is worth 8 Naira. And that's like equivalent of you paying 20% tax. Unfortunately, this way of government funding the budget by printing money to spend impacts negatively on the low-income earners and vulnerable people more than the upper class, because the upper class have dollar investment, they have real estate that can protect them to a large extent from inflation. So which means it is in the interest of society to ensure that taxes are collected in a way that does not impact the low-income earners and middle class negatively, while still generating revenue to ensure that government is not printing money to spend. And there are other issues there, that can't go through all of that because of time. And you see, because of the reforms, many of these indicators that were amber, waiting to turn red, have now turned green. Some of them are still amber, so which means it's work in progress. If those reforms had not been done, Nigerians would say, God forbid, by today, you'll be seeing far worse indicators, like inflation will not even be 20 or 30%. You'll be talking about Zimbabwe level of inflation. Remember that at that time as well, the NNPC Limited, that was supposed to be remitting over $10 billion to the coffers of government, said they were using all of that to subsidize PMS. They even got to a point where they were using future production as collateral to borrow so that they can subsidize PMS consumption. And once you were out of future production to use, then and you can't print dollars, then you can't even bring PMS into Nigeria, and there won't be Dangote refinery because Dangote cannot borrow to build a refinery and be selling at 200 naira and be hoping that government will pay the subsidy when the government itself was running out of money. So, but today, those macro indicators are yielding positive outcome. But what we need to do is our political leaders and our policymakers have to accelerate how these macro results translate into micro outcome for households and individuals so that people can buy food to eat, they can send their kids to school, they can afford transportation and shelter and the basic things of life. So, how about the tax system? Now, I use this analogy to explain how the global tax system, if you were to be different cards representing different countries, and those cards are in a race. Why did I pick that? Because the world is a global village, and there's competition for investment, for employment, for intellectual property, for everything, for business and investment as well. So the current system we have in Nigeria, many of the laws we inherited from our colonial masters before our independence, before many of us on this call were born. So Nigeria will be represented, if you look at the current system we have, by the 1960 B2 that you see there. Whereas even within Africa, some countries are developed already in terms of their tax system, far more than Nigeria, like South Africa, Mauritius, Rwanda, and they will be represented by the more modern POJO that you see in the middle. And the most developed countries will be the Tesla Cybertruck that you see up there, and that's really the OECD countries. Now, you'd agree in that in this competition, if we have to run this race, the Nigerian driver has almost no chance of winning. And it won't be because of that driver. It doesn't matter how experienced the driver is, how prayerful that driver is. Maybe he even fasted or prayed before the competition. The problem is not with the driver, the problem is with the car. And the solution to this car is not to buy a new engine, is not to repaint the car and replace the tires, it's to buy a new car. Because the system we have is unconducive for growth. We have too many taxes, multiplicity of taxes, and many agencies trying to collect those taxes. Our corporate tax rate for businesses is one of the highest in the world. We rank in top 10. We are taxing poverty. People who are earning 40K, 50K, 60K are paying PAYE. And that's the money they earn is not even enough to meet their basic needs. In some other countries, government would even add on top of that for you to meet your basic needs, but then they're the one paying taxes. When the tax amnesty was launched in 2017, for any of you who may have followed that development, the vice president at the time, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, was acting as the president. And while he was launching the tax amnesty, the data he reeled out was that about 96% of the income tax collected by government is mostly coming from low-income earners. So how is it that in a country where you already have high income disparity, you're also taxing the low-income earners even more than the high-income earners? So this is one way to easily increase inequality and create social discontent. So we need to stop taxing poverty. We need to stop taxing capital and investment when people want to set up businesses. We have all manners of taxes that make it almost impossible for them to do business successfully. And then we use very archaic laws with ambiguous provisions. So this is the current situation we have in Nigeria, which cannot take us forward. So therefore, there's a need for reform. In fact, this reform should have been done like 20, 30 years ago, but they say the next best time is now. So you will see the building blocks to the right of this slide. And these are the things you need to create a system that works for the people. You need to build trust. You need equity. You need simplicity. You need tax policies that are forward-looking and visionary. And at the top of that building block is a social contract, which is that at the end of the day, this tax system has to work for the people such that the taxes that people pay should count for something. It should count for social services. It should count for infrastructure. People should be able to say, because I paid my taxes, I have good roads, I have running water that I can drink, and so on and so forth. So this is a journey that we have to all embark on because we don't have any other place we can truly call our home. So the reform objectives are promote fairness, harmonize the tax system, promote efficiency, improve the ease of doing business, ensure there's transparency and economic development. So far, we have made some progress, including there's economic stability and growth is coming back. We see the economy growing at about 4%. This economy can easily grow by double digits if the right things are done. And that's when people will really feel the impact that the economy is growing in a way that is meaningful to them individually. We're seeing rising investor confidence, whether it's to do with purchasing manager index, those who are familiar with that, whether it's to do with gross capital formation, whether it's to do with the market, capital markets, where we've seen the increase in foreign portfolio investment in the capital market over the past 2 years, as well as even the Eurobond that government issued recently. We've seen the investor interest in Nigeria. So there's also the progress being made around modernization, where there's better use of technology and intelligence. So a lot of what we do in the tax system, in the past, were manual. You want to collect tax clearance certificate, you need to travel to the tax office, you need to beg someone, you buy an asset, they'll say, go and collect certificate of acceptance. Some people will travel from Abuja to your office, inspect, ask you to pay transport, pay accommodation. All those things are things that were like that's what CAFA was introduced in the 70s. And then this is 2025, and we're still doing things that we introduced before, like 40, 50 years ago. So this new reform is getting rid of all those manual processes, cumbersome processes, so that, I remember there were times when, in those days, when if you have a bank account, you can only go to the branch where you open your bank account before you can withdraw anything. And you even want to go and withdraw, you collect tally and go and sit down because it will take time before it gets to your turn. Many of us on this call, including myself, we can't remember the last time we went to a bank because there's self-service. So we need to make the tax system as simple as you trying to buy airtime on your phone or you trying to order a pizza. So, and it's work in progress. This is not, work done yet. You would see already that doing reforms is not very easy because there'll be different political interests. There'll be different vested interests. There are many government agencies that are collecting all manner of taxes, imposing burden on people, and this reform is meant to stop them. And of course, you know that those agencies will not just sit back and say these are fantastic reforms. We have those who have been enjoying access to incentive that was not available to everyone. If you are stopping it, those people will fight back. We have those who, for whatever reasons, just want the government to fail because they disagree or they don't like the people that are in government. And I always say that it's okay if you don't like the people in your government, but you should never get to a point where you hate your country. Nelson Mandela was the one that said, like when you hate your country, it's like taking poison and then hoping that it magically kills your enemy. So you should never get to a point where you wish your country evil because that's your country. So my view and my own approach has always been for a very long time. I do not support or against any government. I'm only in support or against government policies. So if you bring out policies that make sense, I'll support the policy. Tomorrow or even the same day, you bring another policy and it does not make sense, I'll criticize it. And I always do that constructively for those who have followed me for a long time, because that's my own way of contributing to my country. Now, having said that, if you just look at this slide, and some of you may have, difficulties even reading the contents. This is the tax approved list of taxes and collection acts that was introduced in 1998, and it was compounded in 2015. Look at the number of taxes and levies that federal government can collect to the right, to the left of the screen. In the middle is state government. To the right is local government. Altogether, these taxes and levies are more than 60. So how can it make sense that officially these are the taxes and levies we're asking businesses to pay in Nigeria today? And this is not even inclusive of the illegal ones. So by the time you add illegal ones collected by some government and some non-state actors, this list would easily be more than 200. You can't be a country that's trying to create employment and to grow your economy in an inclusive way, lift people out of poverty, and yet you have these crushing taxes all over the place. So this is one of the priorities for this reform, to say we must solve this problem of multiplicity of taxes. We've been talking about this since I was, in school trying to write professional exams almost, 25, 27 years ago. So instead of those problems being solved, we compounded those problems every single time, because it's possible that between, yesterday and today that we are speaking now, one local government somewhere could have invented another levy. So there's a video that we will not be able to play it. I'll share the link with you, where you see some, people just trying to move things around and having to spend up to 700,000 naira on these illegal and legal but illegally collected taxes and levies on the road, maybe just moving yams. And then the yam gets to its destination, and the poor man cannot even afford yam anymore because of these illegal taxes. So what I want to do now is to quickly highlight for you some of the key changes in the new tax laws and the policy thinking behind them. Pay attention to the message under the heading. It's a quote that I use a lot by Harlan Ellison that says, "You are not entitled to your opinion. You are entitled to your informed opinion." That's because no one is entitled to be ignorant. So you can't just go online or anywhere, TV or newspapers, and just see anything you like and you say is your opinion, right? So it has to be that what you are saying is informed. Otherwise, whoever is listening to you, and if they trust you, you can make them do the wrong thing or make the wrong decisions that can impact them negatively. So the first thematic area I want to talk to you about is fiscal equity. So these reforms are trying to address situation where, if you think about our low-income earners, there used to be a time in Nigeria when the naira was stronger than the US dollar. And at that time, about 30,000 naira per annum was exempted from tax. So just imagine 30,000 naira, just imagine even just $30,000. $30,000 would easily be more than 30 million naira today. So that was the amount that was exempted in those days. Then inflation came, the economy struggled, but nobody was reviewing those amounts. Fast forward, 30,000 naira a year became so ridiculous. And you say, is that even money to buy a pencil or what? And then it was reviewed to 30,000 naira per month a few years ago. But even that amount now, means next to nothing. So if you leave your tax band because there's inflation and you're not adjusting them, what you will do is you drag your low-income earners to the highest tax band. Under the current system we have, if you're earning about 300 to 400,000 naira a month, you're already paying the marginal top tax rate like a billionaire. So it cannot be right that someone that is earning just 300, 400,000 naira a month is paying the same marginal rate as a billionaire. That promotes inequality. So we call it fiscal drag. Fiscal drag because it drags the low-income earners into higher tax band. Okay, some of you may have been following the budget presentation in the UK. The UK said they're going to leave the tax band without adjusting it for a few years. And because people understand what that means, people are saying that means you're going to be taxing the poor even more, right? Imagine Nigeria, we left it for so many years. So this new tax reform now is addressing that in a significant way by increasing the threshold of exemption for low-income earners, by reducing the tax rate for middle-income earners, and then for high-income earners, pay marginally more progressively depending on how much they earn. And I'll show you some of the data now so you can see the numbers, because this is one of the areas where there's a lot of misinformation out there. Suddenly everybody is calculating personal income tax, including people that have never filed personal income tax for themselves before, are suddenly advising the public on how their taxes will be calculated from next year. Unfortunately, people believe all of that and they are running with it, which is not helpful. Then economic growth. If any government is reasonable with their policies, even when they want tax revenue, the secret to tax revenue generation is to allow businesses to grow. So if I have a business that is worth 1 billion naira, and I insist I must collect 40% of its tax, of its profit as tax, okay, I will think I've collected money. But what if I allow that 1 billion naira business to become 100 billion? Even if I collect 10%, I'm better off. If I have a lot of people that are unemployed, they can't pay personal income tax. They can't buy a lot of goods and services and pay VAT. So if I want personal income tax, or if I want VAT, why don't I stimulate the economy and create more jobs? Why don't I allow businesses to grow? This is why, you see some companies in the US today. There was a time that Elon Musk, I think it was in 2021, he said he paid about $11 billion in personal income tax. When I converted Elon Musk's personal income tax to Naira, it was more than the equivalent of 4 years personal income tax collected for the whole of Nigeria. 4 years. One person paid it in 1 year in the US. Now, do you think that Elon Musk paid because he loves America? After all, he's originally South African. Why did he not pay it in South Africa? He paid in the US because it was the US that gave him the opportunity to create wealth. If he was in South Africa, he would not be the richest man in the world today. So he owed it to the American government to give back. So any country that is thinking properly, we know that the best way to generate revenue is to grow the economy, allow people to prosper, allow businesses to thrive. Let your nano businesses become micro, micro become small, small become medium, medium become large, large become multinational. Why don't we even have Nigerian companies that are multinational companies, sending Nigerians abroad as CEOs, executive directors, and bringing in dollar revenue so that when the price of crude oil goes down, we stop panicking? Why don't we have those kind of companies in Nigeria? Then the other one is competitiveness. Nigerian businesses need to be able to compete first locally. You should not be producing something in Nigeria and somebody brings it from China, from Spain, from India, and it ends up, even after adding freight, adding duties, it's still cheaper than the one produced in Nigeria. It means we are not even competitive locally. Some of those things are to do with infrastructural problems. Some of them is to do with high interest rates. Some of them is to do with policies and overregulation. We're speaking to exporters, and some of them said they need to go through more than 20 approvals to export anything. And they have to pay at each of these approval points, sometimes taking them more than 2 months. So these things have a way of adding to your cost and making you uncompetitive. So under this new tax reform law, many of those impediments have been removed. You may also be aware that government is about finalizing now the national single window, where if anybody is doing import or export, they just have one point of clearing everything so that things can be done faster, they can be done better, and the cost can be lower. We have removed minimum tax on capital. So companies in Nigeria have to pay minimum tax even when they have not made money. They've made losses or they made very little profit, and government says you must pay minimum tax. Essentially, those companies are forced to go and borrow money to pay tax or pay it out of their capital. This is one of the fastest way to kill a dying company. So that minimum tax has been removed. We have introduced unilateral tax relief. What that means is if you are in Nigeria as a headquarter location, shared services center, business process outsourcing, and you are doing business globally, this new tax law will make sure that you don't pay double taxation because there's a provision called unilateral tax relief. What does that mean? It means that Nigeria will give you relief for any tax you've paid abroad on any income that you earn out of Nigeria being a global organization. And that same principle even applies to individuals as well. So if you earn money online, let's say you're a content creator, and or maybe you are a freelancer or whatever it is that you do, and you are earning money from the US and they already tax you in the US, but you are physically here in Nigeria and you are tax resident. Under this new tax reform law, this unilateral tax relief would ensure that you do not pay double taxation. Tax harmonization, I already mentioned that to you. Number of taxes are too many. This reform is trying to bring all of them down to to a single digit, so that all taxes by local government, state, federal combined should be less than 10. That is the aspiration we have. It's a long journey because some of these nuisance taxes, like bicycle levy, wheelbarrow tax, radio levy, TV license, produce tax, do you know they're actually in the Constitution? Because they're in the Constitution, you can't override them by enacting a law. Otherwise, your law will be unconstitutional. So while we've tried to address many of the multiple taxes in the new tax laws, the one in the Constitution, we have sent proposals to the National Assembly to, as part of the ongoing amendment of the Constitution, to alter the Constitution and address these nuisance taxes. So that process, good news is making progress at the National Assembly. In addition to that, we also drafted, because the Supreme Court said, the federal government cannot dictate to state and local government about taxes that they collect. So what we did was we drafted a tax harmonization law for states, for them to enact. At least states can enact for themselves that they will not be collecting all these nuisance taxes. The good news is, we completed this exercise just about 2 weeks ago. As I speak to you today, 3 states have approved it. Anambra State, let me say it in the order in which they did it. First was Ekiti State, then Zamfara State, and now Anambra State. So our aspiration is that, before the end of this month or early January, all the states would have enacted it. Just imagine what that would do for the ordinary person, the small business owner who is just trying to hustle, the haulage business, the transporter. Imagine we can get rid of all these nuisance taxes. It will really help our economy. The sad part also is that today people pay all these multiple taxes. They pay a lot of taxes, but the revenue to the government is really small. So people are paying so much and government is collecting so little because, many of those revenue are lost in transit because of the level of corruption, the level of waste and leakages. So if you harmonize the taxes, and there are few of them, and you automate how they're collected, and you restrict the collection to only the revenue authority, then you have a better chance of people paying less and government collecting more, because you bring in efficiency and you fight corruption in the process. We're also harmonizing tax identity. Speaking to you now as a person, I have like 3 IDs, 3 tax identification numbers in Nigeria. I have one with LRS because I used to work, and my family is still today living in Lagos State. So I have my tax ID with Lagos State, TIN. I have another one with Joint Tax Board. The FCTIRS said they often see me in Abuja. I should come and register. Imagine if I also have a side hustle and I need to register for VAT, I'll get another one from FRS. So only me, I'll have 4 identities. Now, this creates a lot of problems for me and the system. So that's why sometimes, you live and work in Lagos or Kano or Abuja or Kebbi, you pay your taxes there. And you want to go to your village to buy land, and they say you must pay another TCC there, and they force you to pay. That's because the IDs are not harmonized. There's no handshake between the tax authorities across Nigeria. So under this new tax reform law, the tax identification you have will be harmonized. You'll be recognized once in the system, and once you pay tax in the state where you work and live, that carries you all over the whole country. It would also ensure that your data is more credible and reliable. The same thing with tax audits. Today there are multiple layers of tax audit. They will tell you there's desk review. Another one is called monitoring. Another one is called audits. Another one is special audits. Another one is investigation. Another one is special investigation. So some companies are being audited perpetually. You almost have to have, a dedicated meeting room and staff attending to tax authorities. This is not helping the businesses to grow. Once you harmonize it, this pressure will go down. Of course, there's modernization, which I already alluded to. Why are people paying taxes in cash? Why can't you use your mobile phone to pay your tax? Why can't you do, other electronic means of paying taxes so that we can track the taxes that people pay, right? And that can create more certainty for the system and improve transparency and governance. And then sustainable revenue. We have wide tax gap in Nigeria. What does that mean? There's a lot of tax evasion, particularly for, high net worth individuals, very influential people sometimes, including some large businesses. I was looking at one report just this morning that shows that the number of active businesses that are filing returns and paying VAT in Nigeria is just over 200,000. So imagine a country where there are more than, 20 million businesses. Let's even say that out of the 20 million businesses, 18 million of them are too small and they're exempted. So you have easily about 2 million, minimum of 2 million businesses that are supposed to be charging VAT and remitting it. But how many do you have? 200,000. Nigeria is over 200 million people. Working population is over 80 million. Let's even say many of these working population people can't even write their name. They can't fill any form. They can't read. They can't write. Do you know how many people are actively in the tax net across Nigeria as individual? Less than 10 million. So the number that should be actively in the tax net for personal income tax purposes should not be less than 40 million in Nigeria. The problem that tax evasion creates is that those 10 million that are paying their taxes are disadvantaged because there are 30 million people who are not paying and they're supposed to be paying. The 200,000 businesses that are filing and paying VAT, they are disadvantaged because there's 2 million other businesses that are not paying what they are paying. So if you and I are doing the same business, you are the one paying your taxes, I'm the one who is evading and not paying my taxes. So easily, I'm better off than you. I have more money to throw around. I can even price you out of the market. So the system was rewarding bad behavior and indirectly punishing those who are trying to do their best. So every society that we aspire to be like, they don't allow tax evasion to persist. So you must address the fair play. You must ensure that everybody is treated equally if they earn the same amount of income and they do the same type of business. We also need to rationalize our incentives. Some of the incentives are only available to you if you're highly connected. Somebody gets incentive because they know someone at the State House, Ministry of Finance, and someone is doing the same business, they don't know anyone, and they don't have access to those incentives. Not only are those incentives wasteful, they are also distortionary. They are creating distortion for the economy. So those are also being addressed under this reform. Many of you will be familiar with the free trade zone area in Nigeria. So the free trade zone was set up in the 90s. The idea was for free zone entities to compete internationally, produce here and export it to the rest of the world. Don't pay tax. Before we knew it, these entities were producing in the free zone and selling it to the local market without paying taxes, competing with Nigerian companies in the local market that are paying taxes. So someone is paying taxes that is over 30%. You are not paying that 30% and you're selling, substitute the same product. How is that company in Nigeria supposed to survive? So before we knew it, out of survivor, some Nigerian local companies, they found ways to be designated as free zone enterprises. I was driving on Eric Moore in Surulere, and I saw a company that I won't mention that has been around for decades, suddenly is designated as a free trade zone area. Free trade zone area. So I spoke to the MD, and he said, Taiwo, I know that this is not right, but this is the only way we can survive. And I said to myself, we have to decide the country we want. Either we declare the whole of Nigeria as a free zone and just print money to spend and deal with the consequences of what happened to Zimbabwe and Venezuela and Sri Lanka, or we say, let's have a proper system where rules make sense and they are followed. So that's one of the reasons why the incentive for the free trade zone area is now being rationalized under this reform. On this slide, you see one of the things we've done around incentives. We used to have this incentive called pioneer status. You can get that pioneer status, you won't pay income tax for 3, 4, or 5 years. And if you are very good at packaging stuff, you can go and convince the authorities, get that incentive and say you want to manufacture, solar panel. After getting the incentive, you can just be importing solar panel and you don't pay tax. There was a lot of abuse. So that pioneer status has been repealed under the new tax law, and a new incentive that is more transparent, predictable, and less subjective has been introduced. It's called Economic Development Incentive for Priority Sector. So those priority sectors are listed on this slide. So you have access to these slides, after this training. So don't worry too much about trying to write. So you see the different sectors that we consider as priority sectors for our economy, from agriculture to energy, creative sector, to issues around textile production, even services like business process outsourcing, shared services centers. You see the amount of investment that will make you eligible for the incentive and the life of that. So from 1st of January, when these laws take effect, the sunset provision you see there tells us how long that incentive will be alive for in Nigeria before it will come to an end. Because we saw in our tax laws, some incentives that were introduced after the Civil War, they're called Reconstruction Investment Allowance. They were meant to help us, fix the economy after the Civil War in the 70s. And we left them for, 40, 50 years. And sometimes we lose a lot of money. We have this kind of incentive where in the oil and gas sector, the price of crude oil per barrel was under $20. And a lot of oil companies were not willing to invest. So Nigeria gave very generous incentives, tax credit, tax relief, deductions. They were very, very generous. And the idea was that once the price of crude oil per barrel goes above $20, we should review those incentives. Price of crude oil per barrel went to even $100. Nobody reviewed it. At the end of the day, Nigeria lost more than $10 billion because we did not review these things on time. So we do not want to take those kind of risks anymore. Instead of allowing an incentive to be open-ended, hoping that somebody will review it, why don't we put a time frame so that if we really want to keep it, we review it before that time frame expires. If we don't, then that incentive will come to an end based on the lifespan indicated in the law. Now, there are major incentives for businesses under these tax reforms. Small businesses with annual turnover of 100 million naira or less and not more than 250 million naira worth of assets will pay corporate income tax at 0%. Whether they are a company or not, they'll be exempted from VAT. They will not charge VAT on their goods and services. They will not need to deduct withholding tax when they are paying their suppliers and vendors. Nobody will deduct withholding tax on them. They are exempted from even capital gains tax. So you see that there's a lot of benefit for small businesses, under this reform. And I know many of you online who are content creators, you run your content creation business like an enterprise. You would also be able to learn, before we finish today, some of the things you can do for yourself. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about paying taxes. It's about how do you organize yourself so that you do what you do in an efficient manner, you save money from a tax point of view, and then you can grow. So for large businesses that are not exempted from companies' income tax, the new tax reform law has a provision to reduce the current tax rate that they pay of 30% to 25%. So that in itself, in 2024, FRS collected 8.6 trillion naira in companies' income tax. If you do the calculation, if you reduce that from 30% to 25%, that's the equivalent of 1.4 trillion naira being given to businesses by these reforms. Number two, that is even bigger, is VAT. Many of us, I think everybody even knows value-added tax. So if you want to do a business now and you just need a laptop and a mobile phone, so you buy a mobile phone, there's VAT on it. You buy a laptop, there's VAT on it. You buy airtime and data, there's VAT on it. And you are doing your business. Under the current law now that we have in Nigeria today, you can't get credit for those VAT that you paid. Under the new law from January next year, the VAT on your laptop, on your mobile phone, on airtime, you bought a car, or whatever, anything you bought to do your business, you'll be able to get the input credit back. This is what, based on 2024 collections, is worth 3.36 trillion naira that businesses will benefit as a result of this input VAT credit from next year. Many people have said wrongly, a part of the misinformation, that government has increased capital gains tax rate so that they want to generate revenue. They are desperate for revenue. Is not supported by data. So I like to always speak to data. Last year, FRS collected 52 billion naira in capital gains tax. So just see how that compares. They collected 8.6 trillion company income tax, 6.7 trillion VAT, and only 52 billion from capital gains tax. So if government wants to generate revenue, why would government give away 1.4 trillion plus 3.3 trillion just so they can increase 78 billion naira? You see, it's not even making sense. So this is why we said people need to try and speak to data, not sentiment, not emotions. When people want all the clicks and the likes and the applause, you can say anything. But at the end of the day, your conscience will say to you that you're just trying to take advantage of the population. If you want to be honest with people, you speak to data. And this is what the data looks like. So let me share with you how this reform would affect different stakeholder groups. The first one is ordinary Nigerians. So the ordinary Nigerian from January next year would see a drop in the prices of basic goods and services like food, education, healthcare, transport, shelter, and then, of course, gifts are exempt. Let me quickly explain this one because I really need everybody on this call to understand this principle. So today, one basic food item that everybody would agree with is bread. So bread, under the current law in Nigeria, is VAT exempt. What that means is when the baker produces bread, the baker should sell bread without charging VAT. So that's why we call it VAT exempt. But that baker, any VAT that the baker had incurred to produce the bread, from buying the bakery equipment. I was listening to one baker today who says those equipment are even imported. VAT is there. You buy sugar, there's VAT. You buy butter, there's VAT. The vehicle to go and deliver the bread, it has VAT. The mobile phone to call the customers has VAT. Airtime to make the calls go through has VAT. You have a lot of VAT you have incurred to produce bread. Under the current system, that VAT is your cost. So what do you think the baker will do? The baker will calculate the cost of producing a loaf of bread, and the baker would add the VAT cost to the cost of production, then add his or her profit margin to determine selling price. When you buy the bread, you won't see VAT on your invoice, but there's hidden VAT because the baker had to pay a lot of VAT to produce the bread. From next year, under this new tax reform law, bread and other basic food items will become zero rated for VAT. What does it mean to be zero rated? To be zero rated means when the baker is selling the bread, the baker should charge VAT as 0%. Of course, that means no VAT. But any VAT that the baker had incurred to produce the bread is refunded 100%. So what that means is the cost of producing bread will automatically come down in January. And if the baker is not greedy and wants to pass that savings or share it with the consumer, the selling price will drop. If the baker is greedy, or all of us keep saying everything will increase, prices will go up, because if we keep saying prices will go up, these people that are supposed to reduce prices will not reduce it. Maybe some of them will even increase it. My friend who is a director at NESG called me about 2 weeks ago and said he wanted to make a dress. He went to the tailor, and the tailor said, the tailor gave the person a price. And the director said, this your price is high, or is it because of year end and Christmas? You are so busy, you have many customers, you are charging me. Don't worry, I'm not time pressed. I'll wait and come back in January. And the tailor said, guy, if you come back in January, the price will even go up further. And he said, why? He said, because of tax reform. So which part of the tax reform, the tailor has no idea. But the tailor has been hearing everybody saying prices will go up. Now, you just imagine the reform was designed to bring down cost and prices. But the narrative is that prices will go up. So we're just creating problems for ourselves. Instead of trying to make sure that we understand it, communicate it clearly, and say to everybody, we expect your prices to come down so that the Nigerian people can truly benefit. Another one is workers. I was surprised when, I think it was May 1st, when NLC and TUC said they are protesting against the tax reform. I couldn't understand it. This is the tax reform that benefits workers the most that I have seen in my adult life in Nigeria. 1/3 of all workers, private and public sector combined, are completely exempted from PAYE from January next year. So those people are paying PAYE today. Even imagine you are earning, 80K, and you are paying even 2,000 or 3,000 naira. That's a lot of money for you. You can't even afford to pay 1 naira because the 80,000 is not even enough for your survival. From January next year, your PAYE will be zero. That's extra money you have in your hand, right? If you are middle income, people earning around 100,000 so people that are earning 100,000 naira or less are about 1/3 of our working population. So those amounts of money will sound so small to many of you, but that's what many of our citizens are earning, or even less. So between that 100,000 to about 2 million naira a month is where you have majority of Nigerians that are working. And those people will see a drop in their PAYE. So the person that was paying 50K before, maybe he will now be paying 40. That's extra savings of 10,000, right? So, and the people above that level, earning, 3 million, 6 million, 20 million naira a month, will see some increases. I have seen many videos online suggesting that people that earn more than 800,000 naira per annum will pay 25%. That is so misleading and so wrong. I'll show you the tax calculator before we finish. Even if you earn 500 million naira a year, I mean 500 million naira a year, you will not get to 25% tax rate. Effective. That's what we call effective tax rates. Not many people may be familiar with it. If you just go to the tax table and you say they said, hey, over 50 million is 25%. And people interpret it to mean that if you earn 60 million naira a year, you pay 25% of 60 million. That's so misleading. The way the tax system works, and some people said, oh, it's only 800,000 naira. They said is 0%. What if, somebody that's earning minimum wage of 70,000 times 12 is 840. Even those people earning minimum wage, they will still pay tax on 40,000. This is misleading. There's a difference between what they call gross income. So your 70,000 minimum wage is your gross income. When you go to the tax law, under the tax table, the 800,000 is called taxable income. Gross income is not the same thing as taxable income. How do you arrive at taxable income if you have gross income? So if your gross income is 70,000 naira per month, your gross per annum is 840,000. You will deduct what we call statutory deductions, pension contribution, National Housing Fund, National Health Insurance Scheme, mortgage interest, and insurance policy for your life. And if you have a spouse, for your spouse as well. You deduct those deductions from your gross. Then you go ahead and deduct rent relief allowance up to 500,000 naira. When you take out all these deductions and allowances, the balance is called taxable income. You then tax the first 800,000 at 0%. So this 800,000 is applicable to everyone, whether you're a billionaire or not. You will not pay any tax on that 800,000. Then you move to the next one. So because of the way it's done in phases, like, bands, it means that if you earn 60 million naira a year, you don't just apply 25% to your 60 million. By the time you finish calculating it, which is why I said to you, and I'll show you the calculation, like I said, even if you earn 500 million naira a year, you will not hit 25% effective tax rate. So this thing of trying to create panic to everybody is not helpful. So under this new tax reform law, workers would also benefit from provisions that says that an employer can give wage award, transport subsidy, and they can hire new staff and they'll get extra tax deduction. This is meant to motivate the employer to give wage award, transport subsidy, and hire more people to their employees. We also found, remote work opportunities. So you content creators are very familiar with this remote work concept. So there are many countries around the world who hire people remotely, and there are platforms where you can gain those opportunities. But we're not seeing those opportunities come in our way in Nigeria because our tax law was discouraging foreign companies from hiring Nigerians to work for them in Nigeria remotely. Because the provision of the law says if a foreign company hires a Nigerian to work for them in Nigeria remotely, that foreign company must come to Nigeria to pay tax. Even if they don't come physically, they have to pay tax in Nigeria. Whereas if that company should go to South Africa to employ South Africans, they employ Kenyans, or they employ Indians or Filipinos, they don't have this kind of problem. So why would they insist that they must hire Nigerians? Are we the only ones in the world? Certainly not. Whereas we have a lot of young people that are tech savvy. Our English and our accent at least is better than many other countries like Indians, and our time zone is superb. We're almost at the center of the world. But our tax policy was discouraging these opportunities for our young people. So this new tax reform law has removed that impediment. So just imagine 1 million, 2 million young Nigerians working remotely, earning $2,000, $3,000 a month. You know what that means? Billions of dollars flowing in our direction in Nigeria to help us strengthen and stabilize the Naira, which all of us will benefit from, and to help those people to leave their families out of poverty. So these are opportunities. So, for example, if you're a young person who wants to do this work remotely, now the new law is opening the policy opportunity for you. It's for you to now find out what are the skills that are needed in what areas to work remotely. And then you look for platforms where they hire people and just enroll in those platforms. Before you know it, you're earning your cool dollar every month. So which is why having the right knowledge of policy helps you to create opportunities for yourself. When Nelfon started, most of our friends and brothers and sisters in the South were skeptical and they were abusing government up and down. By the time they showed the data, our brothers and sisters in the North were even more receptive to government policies. And they were the one with most of the, of the loans that they have taken. If somebody wants to give you a loan that is interest-free, you don't need to pay back until you find a job. And when you find a job, you don't pay more than 10%. My brothers and sisters, that is another name for government grants. Not because in many countries where they even do student loan, they charge interest on it. and their inflation is lower than us. So which means when you borrow $1,000 in the US, after 5 years, you are still paying back almost 1,000 equivalent. If you borrow 1,000 naira in Nigeria after 5 years, the amount you're even paying back, even though it's physically 1,000, is barely 200 naira. So these are opportunities for people that they must understand government policy, key into it, and take advantage where it benefits them. So for content creators, many of you on the call, what would this mean for you? As a content creator, you are treated the same way like any other person. You are doing your business online. Other people are doing their businesses offline, physically, mom and pop shop or business premises. The tax law does not make a discrimination or distinction between the platform on which you are doing your business. You're doing business, you're earning income, you are treated equally. If the amount you earn from your online content creation business is below the exemption threshold, you also will not pay tax like anybody else. If you are above the exemption threshold, you pay tax like anybody else who will pay their taxes. Should you want to make sure that you maximize your position as a content creator, you can register what you do as a business or a limited liability company. Your tax becomes 0%. You don't need to worry about VAT, withholding tax. You have one or two staff helping you carrying, cameras and lights. If you do that, you pay them a stipend and they don't need to pay tax as well. And the money you spend, you buy cameras, you buy laptop, you buy airtime, you need to look nice. So you buy, new clothes. For the women, for example, they do makeup and those makeups are quite expensive. So those things you keep proper record and you deduct it. So you've made $10,000, but you spent $7,000. Deduct the $7,000 first. You bought a laptop, claim deduction for, we call it capital allowance. You have a car, claim capital allowances for that car. If you do things properly, you can actually do the right thing and pay almost next to nothing in tax. And this way of organizing what you do helps you to scale because you're organized. You even know how much you're making. You know how profitable it is because you have proper record. And when investment is looking for someone, investment is more likely to come in your direction when you are disorganized than if you are just, God help us kind of a person, right? So these are some of the opportunities that you have. Small business owners, I think they are the biggest winners of this reform, along with low-income earners, because they're just exempted from almost everything. 0% CIT, simplified tax returns, no VAT, no withholding tax, no development levy, no capital gains tax. And then there's the Office of the Tax Ombud that has been established, where today, as a small business owner, if the taxman comes and they say you're owing 10 million, you're owing 4 million, 6 million naira, and they start harassing you and they say they will close your premises, all of those kind of things. Where do you go? You don't understand the law to defend yourself. You don't have the money to hire lawyers and accountants and tax experts. So you start begging. In most cases, they will then give you one account, private account to pay, pay 2 million there, give you government account, pay something small. They let you rest for 6 months to 1 year, change the team to another team, they come back. And what we are doing, and this is the majority of our taxpayers, this is how they are vulnerable today, left out in the code, no support for them whatsoever. Under the new tax reform law, the Office of the Tax Ombud has been set up to protect taxpayers. The setup is such that you should have a toll-free line, you should have a call center, you don't even need to speak English or write big grammars, and the tax ombud will come to your aid, protect your rights. And the law provides that everything the ombud does for you, including if they go to court on your behalf, is free of charge. So this is protection. High income earners, if you earn 3 million naira, 5 million naira a month, you see some slight increases, maybe 10K, maybe 20K. If you earn a lot more, 200 million, 500 million, you see your effective tax rate will go up from around 19% today to close to 25. But really, hardly would anybody get to that 25% based on the way the tax law works because of deductions and reliefs. Now, for high income earners, even those that will pay marginally more, this high income earners are only the top 2% of our working population. So if you are on this call and you are making more than 2 million naira a month, you are in the top 2% top earners in Nigeria. You know that Nigeria is a large country. So when you say 2%, 2% of Nigeria is easily, something like that's like 4 million people already, actually, just 2%. So we don't even have up to that are earning 2 million naira or more. So those people, while they might be paying incrementally more, right? Some of them will pay just 5,000 more, some of them will pay 6,000 more, some will pay 10,000 more, some will pay, 50,000 more, and so on and so forth. You will find that those people are mostly top people in the organizations where they work, like executive directors, or they even own their businesses. So even those high income earners, they'll be better off under the tax reform, because if I'm a business owner and my tax goes up, my personal tax goes up by 1 million, but my business next year will benefit from this reform by 10 million naira. So for me, why wouldn't I like that reform? Because I gain 10 million from my business and I pay 1 million more in personal taxes. I'm 9 million better off. For those who are director level earning this kind of amounts, what we've been saying is that their company will make a lot of money more, so they can easily just augment their salary so that nobody is out of pocket. Of course, for 98% of workers in the private and public sector combined, you don't need to convince them, because nobody argues with when their PAYE goes down and their take-home pay goes up. The principle and the philosophy for this reform is that if you allow the disposable income of workers to go up, so they have more take-home pay, and with what we are doing with VAT, you allow their basic consumption to come down. The 5 basic things that Nigerians spend money on is food, shelter by way of rent, transportation, education, and health. These 5 items have been prioritized under that reform. So when your disposable income goes up because you pay less taxes and the prices of basic goods and services come down, you just suddenly find that you have more space, to take care of your needs. And what this also means is that those who position themselves as businesses will have better opportunity to be patronized and for their businesses to grow. Okay, so these high income earners would even still benefit. We also have NGOs and faith-based organizations like churches and mosques. Some of them are wondering what is going to happen to us under this new tax law. Under the new tax law, those NGOs and faith-based organizations are also exempt from tax, provided they stay with their not-for-profit activities. The moment you start doing business, you will pay tax like anybody else. Okay? But people who work for those organizations, so if you are a worker in a church, in an NGO, in a mosque, and you earn a salary, you pay tax like anybody else. So we have pensioners, okay? So pensioners are exempted from retirement benefits. There's tax exemption on pension. Severance pay, if somebody is laid off and they pay them, severance payment. So up to 50 million is tax-free. But if you're a pensioner or you're a retiree and you are doing business, you pay tax on that business like anybody else. Aliko Dangote, for example, I think is 68. Just imagine if you see all pensioners are exempted, whatever they do. Aliko Dangote will just say, I'm a pensioner, and therefore all his businesses will be exempted from tax. So pensioners are only exempted from their retirement benefits, they're exempted on their pension income, and then if they have severance pay when they are leaving employment, up to 50 million is exempt. If they are doing business, they will pay tax on that business like anybody else. If you're a pensioner, you have a property and you rent it out, and you're collecting rent, you will not be exempted, because like anybody else, you pay tax on your rent. Virtual currency. When you have realized gain, you take it against any realized losses before you determine how much net gain you have. That net gain, you say, is it below the exemption threshold? If yes, no tax. If it's above the exemption threshold, then you pay tax like anybody else. And by the way, all these things I'm telling you about, virtual currency, content creator, They are not even new. They've been in our existing law. Okay, so because of the low level of awareness of tax in Nigeria, many people are finding things out for the first time and they just assume it was introduced under the new tax law. There's also the Nigerian in diaspora. A Nigerian in the diaspora has no tax to pay in Nigeria on their foreign income, what they earn abroad, no tax on remittances when they send money to Nigeria. Then we have simplified tax ID process. If they have a bank account they are using for business in Nigeria and they want a tax ID, they can get it online the same day. In fact, we used to have in our current tax law a provision to tax income brought in, received in. We've removed all of those ones. So which means Nigerians in the diaspora even have now better certainty of tax exemption under the new law. We've seen some misinformation on social media where they said whether you are Nigerian in Nigeria or abroad, you must pay tax and da. Those things are not correct. So these tax laws will impact our economy positively. Businesses, household, and government. And these are some of the myths and misinformation and what is facts. One is government is introducing new taxes on the masses. That is not correct. This reform is removing many taxes and harmonizing the ones that are left. Your bank account will be debited from January 2023 is a big lie. Nobody is debiting your bank account. The requirement to have a tax ID for your bank account is not new. It was introduced in 2020 under the 2020 Finance Act. And it took effect from 13th of January 2020 for more than 5 years. People were already required to provide TIN if they have a bank account they use for business, like you are doing a trade, or for income, like you earn salary. So what happened is we were repealing all our old laws so that we can write new ones. But it doesn't mean that every single thing in the old tax law was bad. So there were things that are still good, and we just transferred them to the new law, like the tax ID. So people are now aware of tax matters in Nigeria that they were not aware of before. And they say, hey, they're supposed to bring tax ID. CBN wants to debit the account. It is not new. Most people that even need this tax ID already have it because it's been in place for over 5 years. Some say small businesses will suffer more. You can see from my presentation already that the biggest beneficiary because they are the majority of our businesses. Okay, more than 40 million nano, micro, small businesses are struggling to just survive on a daily basis. They're the ones that hire our people the most. Over 70% of employment is in this sector. So imagine you help them to be able to grow. You take away their tax burden, everybody will feel it in Nigeria. When you give tax benefits only to large companies, the impact is less. When you help small businesses, the impact is nationwide, the impact is inclusive. Some people say states will lose revenue because now they've harmonized everything. Federal government is collecting taxes. In fact, this personal income tax, I've seen many people create content and they say it's Tinubu. Meanwhile, it's not even federal government that collects personal income tax. It is states that collect personal income tax. And that has not changed under the new tax reform law. So under this new reform, states are even better off because some of the revenue that the federal government used to collect or share before have been transferred to states under this new reform law. The way it should be because they are the level of government that is closest to the people, which means, those of us who are citizens who like to hold government to account, we must ensure that we're asking questions not only of the federal government, which is good, but also of states and local government. Let's hold all of our government to account. Some, myth is that the tax reform is for revenue grabbing. That is not true. Based on what I've shared with you, you see that government is giving away a lot. Government is repealing many taxes. Government is harmonizing so many of them because government recognizes that if you allow the economy to grow, you make more money in the long run in a sustainable manner. Capital gains tax of 30% will be charged on your capital market investment. This is not true. I was on the plane from Lagos to Abuja. We landed and, a gentleman walked to me and said, oh, you are the tax guy. I see you on TV. But because of you now, I cannot buy my shares. I said, what happened? He said he's a shareholder in Sterling Bank. Sterling Bank was doing right issue. Right issue is when a company says that existing shareholders can buy more shares at a lower price. So when you buy, you're good. When you don't buy, you lose money. So he said he did not buy. And I said, why? He said, because we have introduced 30% tax on capital gains on shares. And I said, hey, quickly call your broker so you can buy. He said, no, it has closed. How much were you going to buy? Less than 10 million naira. So the person that told him the wrong information of 30% did not even tell him that 150 million naira sales proceed and up to 10 million naira gain a year is exempt from tax. So in the capital market, if you're an investor in the stock market, everybody in the stock market is exempted. Over 99% are exempted without any conditions attached. The remaining less than 1% are exempted if they reinvest, because what we're trying to do is to create more activities in the market and reward long-term perspective for those big-time investors. Another one is even minimum wage earners will pay PAYE tax because they take 70,000 multiplied by 12, they say it's 840, and they say in the tax law only 800 is exempt. Again, wrong understanding of how the tax law works and how the tax table it should be interpreted. I've explained that earlier on. Gross salary is different from taxable income. You can't be comparing gross salary with taxable income and jumping to conclusion to say minimum wage earners will be taxed. In fact, in the new tax laws, there is a specific provision that says minimum wage, national minimum wage is exempt. So if they increase national minimum wage today to 200,000 naira per month, that 200,000 naira is automatically exempted from tax. So that provision is also in the new tax law. Gifts and remittances will be subject to tax is a lie. What is the fact? Gifts and remittances are not subject to tax. The same thing, Nigerians in the diaspora will be taxed, is not true. Nigerians in the diaspora will not be taxed. In fact, their exemption status is clearer under this new tax reform law than the old one. Pension and retirement benefits will be taxed is not true as well. So there's the danger of that single story. Sometimes you have outright misinformation. Sometimes you have the danger of a single story where someone just tells you only what they have selected and they want you to hear either because they want to drive engagement or because they just don't like the government and they wish the government can fail, which I said, it's almost like wanting your country to fail as well. So there's this proverbial blind man and an elephant. So these blind men could not see the object in front of them, so they moved closer to feel it. And depending on the part of the elephant that they felt, they thought it could be a rope. One of them said it was a tree. One says it's a wall, fan, spear, or snake. None of them got it right because none of them felt the entire object. So it's exactly the same thing with this tax reform. If you jump on just one aspect, tax ID, next day you say, oh, it's capital gains tax. The day after you say it's minimum wage people will be taxed. You will miss the big picture. The big picture is that everyone benefits under this reform, whether you're a high net worth individual, large business, small business, low income earner, or the ordinary Nigerian. Some of the misinformation include they want to tax us to death. Nigerian tax rate is too high. Look at Nigeria. This is not even comparing with foreign countries. Comparing with Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, you see our rates are the lowest, or in some cases in just one or two, actually maybe one is joint lowest. Look at our VAT rate. We don't have tax on airtime because there was tax on airtime and this government reversed it. For our rich people, the top rate, that even if you earn 1 billion naira a month, the top rate you can pay is 25. In Ghana and Kenya, that's 35. In South Africa, it's as high as 45, percent. So we are not suggesting that Nigeria should increase its tax rate, but we should not be promoting negativity about our country when we have good stories to tell. And these things, this narrative that we have all over the place, particularly on the internet, is affecting investor sentiment to Nigeria. It means that less opportunities and less investment are coming in our direction that would otherwise have been coming if we were just factual. I'm not even saying you should make up, nice story about your country. No, just be factual. Just being factual alone could have changed the whole narrative for our country and provide better opportunities for us. Look at the capital market. Some people just decided from nowhere to say, hey, capital gains tax in the new tax law is going to crash the market. Before they started this wrong narrative, the market had gained about 45% year to date, one of the best performing in the world. But there's no capital market that gains every day, forever. The day there is a bit of correction or profit taking, they say, oh, it was capital gains tax. They repeated it again and again. By the weekend of that week, stockbrokers were calling their investors, you want to come and sell, everybody is selling. That's how we created Black Tuesday. On the 11th of November 2025, many people went to the market to go and sell, and the market nearly crashed. Lost 4.6 trillion in just one day. Is the biggest amount of loss in more than 15 years. But guess what we found? We looked at the data for that day. There were 20,173 deals. That's the number of transactions. Worth 23.5 billion naira, which means the average size of a transaction was just a little over 1 million naira. Now, this new tax law exempts 150 million naira from tax. Why are people selling 1 million, rushing to go and sell? Of course, it's because they didn't understand the new tax law, and they have followed the misinformation that they saw on TV and social media and everywhere. Some even had, Twitter space, and they said bloodbaths. That's how people sold. Now, this misinformation has led to real losses for real people because they were deceived. After we put out the explanation and all of that, the market bounced back a little bit. Today, I think I was looking at the reports for yesterday. I think the market is now at an all-time high. So this market, as I speak to you now, has gained, close to 46% in Naira terms. In dollar terms, it has gained more than 50% this year. That's better than, even crypto, is better than many US stock and all of that. But the narrative we put out there is that they have imposed 30% tax on everybody, and that's not helping us to attract people we should attract. The average age of investors in the capital market is more than 50 years. There are old people there. Our young people are not investing. They're doing virtual currency. The size of the capital market in Nigeria is a little over 60 billion. That's about the size of virtual asset as well, crypto and stable coin. And our young people that invest in this virtual asset, they don't have 150 million, or they invest $100, $50, $80. Imagine that we give them the right information and they invest that money in the capital market. The capital market has better returns and is tax exempt, whereas their crypto has lower return and is taxable. So again, you see the power of information and the danger and risk of misinformation. Another one is personal income tax. They say, you pay tax, you pay this, it's a lie. So the QR code you see to the right of this screen is the tax calculator we have developed. So when you download, when you put this QR code and you go to the link, you see the calculator, you can put any salary information you like. It will tell you the tax that is payable now under the current law and the tax that is payable under the new law. Okay, you see that even somebody that is earning 18 million naira a year, that's 1.5 million naira per month, is paying less tax. Okay. So there's also the fake news of this government wants to kill us with taxes. We had a session for journalists, and I asked them to tell me one tax that this government has introduced on the masses. And I said I will give whoever gets the answer right 100,000 naira. And nobody could provide any answers. On the contrary, this is the government that has been deliberate in suspending, reversing, or reducing taxes more than anyone since our independence. And I'll give you an example of those taxes. I said we'll speak to facts, no emotion, no sentiment. And I'm not promoting, politicians or anything. I'm just along with my team on this committee and Nigerians who say want to do more than complain, want to step forward and see how we can contribute to our country being a better place. Many of us travel across the world and we know our country can be better. So our only two ways to step forward and contribute. And trying to contribute in Nigeria is such a very difficult thing, because even the people you are fighting for are also fighting you. You are fighting the establishment, you are fighting the public sector, you are fighting the politicians just to get things. And then the same people are also, you are just in the middle and you are praying to God every day, God, So these governments has reversed the excise tax on airtime and telecommunication of 5%, reversed the cybersecurity levy on money transfer that was introduced by previous administration. Carbon tax was introduced on single-use plastic, all these nylon bags. There was already tax introduced on it that the president suspended. If you go back in time, on the 6th of July, 2023, the president signed 1 month, 2 months after inauguration, okay, less than 2 months after inauguration, he signed 4 executive orders. Those executive orders were suspending different taxes. If you Google it, when you just, you're less emotional, just Google it and you find information on the internet. These are some of the taxes suspended. There was excise tax already imposed on vehicles, imported vehicles of 2000 cc and above. It was suspended. Import duty on food item, agri product, pharmaceutical was also waived. 4% import levy that customer wanted to start collecting was also suspended. Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria was charging private companies that they paid hundreds of millions of naira, has capped the amount any company can pay to Financial Council of Nigeria to 25 million naira a year. And there was also the expatriate employment levy that was approved by previous government, was activated under this government. Then the private sector said this doesn't make sense. It's going to increase our costs. And then the government also reversed it. Okay. So in a nutshell, it is negligence to misinform people out of ignorance. So you are misinforming because you also don't know. And we think that many people who are misinforming are in this category. It's not like they want, bad things for their followers, or they want to create, panic, or they want their followers to miss out on the benefits of the new reform. They actually mean well, but they also don't have the right knowledge. So they are misinforming out of ignorance. So that in itself is negligence, because if you stand up to speak on a subject, you should do your work to know it. And it's not just to Google online. You just don't go on Google and start creating a video on how to pay taxes. You should talk to experts. There are people who went to school for this. They did professional exam. They have been working for 20, 30 years. There's a reason why this is a specialist area. The same way that you just won't jump into a plane and start flying it because you love flying, right? The same way you just don't go to anyone when you are sick. You don't go to your tailor and say, my tailor is nice and prayerful. You go to a medical doctor. When it comes to issues of tax and finance, go to experts, not someone who just creates content because they have a ring light and they have a camera. By the way, people who are trying to inform our people are helping the system. They just need to ensure that they are not sharing wrong information. So if you share wrong information out of ignorance, you are negligent. If you do so intentionally, that is sabotage, because you're actually working against the interests of the followers that give you a living and that give you visibility. So what should we do? Let's seek better understanding. Constructive engagement. We're not saying these laws and reforms are perfect. Far from it. If anything is wrong, do your research, find the evidence, provide a section of the law that is creating the problem, and make your proposal as to what else can be done better. That is how nations move forward. We need to manage the transition. So these reforms will require us to behave differently. So if you have an account that you're using for business, there's no tax ID, apply for the tax ID. If you are doing business and you're spending money on your content creation, keep the record, because that record that you keep will save you a lot of money. If you need to register a company, we said under this new reform law from next year, 100 million naira revenue a year, 0% tax. Corporate Affairs Commission came out about 4 weeks ago. They said they will register 250,000 companies for free. So as I speak to you now, you can finish this call, go to CAC website, register your company, keep record from next year. And I'm not saying you should go and hire an accountant. You can just, when you pay, collect receipt or use POS or use bank transfer. If they give you POS receipts, it can fade. Just snap it on your phone, nothing complicated. Such that if you generate your bank statement, it gives you an idea of your expenses, including the receipts you have. That will save you a lot of money. It will make you entitled to a lot of benefits, including access to credit and ability to grow your business and expand. And you need to position yourself. I gave you a couple of examples, including opportunities opening up in the remote sector where if you want to earn dollars and you don't want to relocate out of Nigeria, feel free to do that, earn your cool dollars in Nigeria. But you need to position, they wouldn't just come and knock your door and say, Amazon, Nvidia, and the Apple are looking for you. Nobody does that. You must first develop the skill, know where the opportunities are, and then find platforms where they can find you. Now that the policy system and the tax system has been reformed to make Nigeria an attractive destination for this remote work. The whole idea of this reform is that when Nigeria succeeds, all of us would win because a rising tide lifts all boats, whether it's boat made out of wood or whether it's a yacht. Everybody is lifted when the country is succeeding. So finally, these are some of the questions you shared with us. We don't have a lot of time left, and I think some of them I've addressed. I'll go through very quickly and then see whether we can take about 2 to 3 questions from those online currently. Do individuals require TIN to continue running their bank accounts? No. If you are not doing business with your bank account and you are not like any income like a salary earner, for example, you are a student or you're a minor, you don't need a tax ID. Will my bank account be debited directly from January 2026? No. Nobody will debit your bank account. This thing about, ability to even take something that belongs to a taxpayer has been in our law since independence. It's a global standard. In some countries, they call it garnishee order, right? So it's a very long process. So first, it has to be that the taxman sees your lifestyle is not aligning with what they know about you. They'll say, we see that you are worth, 200 million naira. Your tax record shows 0 or 1 million. Can you explain yourself? You say, oh, no, this 200 million is the legacy that my daddy gave to me. It's a gift from people who love me around, or is a loan. Then, if you refuse to explain or your explanation is not adding up, and they say, okay, we think your tax is 10 million naira, you now have like 30 days to object. Object means you don't agree and you explain. Then the taxman will look at it again and revise it and say, revise assessment. You also have 30 days to say you disagree again. When the taxman is tired of the back and forth, he will give you a notice of refusal to amend. You still have 30 days to say you disagree. And then you can go to an appeal. Appeal can go to tax appeal tribunal. When they finish there, you don't like it to go to high court. You don't like it to go to court of appeal. You don't like it to go to Supreme Court before the thing is finally determined. That can easily take you 5 to 10 years before government will now say, the Supreme Court has decided that you're owing us 5 million. Anybody who has 5 million belonging to you, whether it's your employer, whether it's your supplier, whether it's your bank, they should give that money to government. Do you think this process that I just explained to you now, they'll be doing it for somebody that has, 300K, 1 million naira in their bank account? No. This law, this power has been in our law since independence. I have never seen it used even once. The closest to this was, Fowler, the FRS, some years back, when he was writing to banks to freeze some business account because they had not registered for VAT. They couldn't even take the money from those accounts. They just froze the account and created inconvenience for those people to go to the FRS to go and sort out themselves. And many people, including myself, disagree with that approach because that's not what the law says. You're supposed to go through a lot of processes before you get to that point. So now the process has been developed to make sure that those procedures are respected. On top of that, there's a tax ombud that can override those procedures when they violate what the law says. So now you have protection that we didn't have before as a taxpayer and an ordinary Nigerian. So is the government introducing new taxes from 2026? No, government is removing them. So some people will say, they are doing tax reform. They want to tax company that are struggling. They want to tax people that cannot feed themselves. And it's okay. Do people even know what they're saying? We are saying currently, we are overtaxing low-income earners. We are overtaxing small businesses. We are overtaxing big businesses. So if you say we don't like the reform, we are saying let's continue with the taxes we are overpaying now. So let's even say government, we are not sure they will be accountable. Government is collecting 10,000 from you today. They say from January they will collect 6,000. Why are you fighting 6,000? At least they are collecting 10,000 naira. You don't know how they are spending it. Is it not better when they collect 6,000 and you also don't know how they are spending it? At least you are 4,000 naira better off. How will the reform impact on digital creators, freelancers, and small businesses? I've explained that. Will capital gain stars of 30% not make the capital market unattractive? I've explained that. Since only 800,000 naira per annum income is exempted, does it not mean that even minimum wage earners will pay tax? I've explained that. Are gifts and remittances subject to tax? No. Will Nigerians in the diaspora also be taxed? No, I've explained both of that. Number 8, best practices for producing accurate tax. What is the best practices for producing accurate tax education content and techniques for simplifying complex tax information for social media audience? I like this question because the content creator that asks this question is someone who wants to do the right thing. And this is the kind of attitude that we like. So if you want to create educative tax content, the first thing is to find credible sources. So if you look at the materials that the top consulting firms will put out, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, Anderson, EY, like companies like even Pedabo, right? So those ones that have sound knowledge of tax. You can also look at CITN, ICANN, right? And then, of course, look at the Presidential Committee. So take the information they put there and try and understand it because those information are credible. When you finish understanding it, try and put it in a language that your followers will understand. You may want to speak local language, right? You may want to do a board and you are writing the amount and do the calculation. So you'll be the superstar because you don't just Google and say, what is my task if I earn 800,000? You go and use it to create a content. Get your source from credible sources. Then simplify it. You know your audience more than I do, right? Based on the preference of your audience, use that language to explain to them. And like I said, be the superstar, doing well by doing good. Number 9, is pension and retirement benefit taxable? No, I explained it earlier on. How about returns on my investment like mutual fund? You don't need to pay tax because what the mutual fund earns is already taxed. If they do withholding tax on interest, withholding tax on dividend, so mutual funds are literally exempted from income tax. With the new tax law, forgive non-compliant small businesses so they can start afresh from January 2026. That is the plan. We're working on, something like a tax amnesty. When small businesses don't pay tax, they don't open an account and be saving the money there. They've spent the money, it's hustle money. They've spent it, they don't have anything left. So if you now say, you have not paid for the past 3 years, they can't even find the money to pay. So what we are planning to do is to say for these small businesses, let's just forgive them, let them come and register and start doing the right thing going forward. This thing I'm just saying to you now has not been approved because, as you know, I don't have the power to approve anything. I just have the privilege to lead a team of very committed Nigerians in coming up with this policy reform and ideas for our country. But this is what our committee is already working on, and that's what I'm sharing with you. So don't go and say that government has approved it, and then when they don't approve it, you now say these people are lying. So just bear in mind, that is the plan. We are optimistic that it will be approved. Number 11, is the perception of migrating from an enterprise to limited liability company even advisable? I like this one as well. So there has been a lot of communication online. Go and register a limited liability company so you don't pay tax. I'll say it depends on what you do. Okay. If what you do is like you're an online content creator, creating a company helps you because that way, all the expenses of running that business, you can put in that company and claim tax deduction for it. Pay 0% for CIT. Don't have to charge VAT. No development levy. No withholding tax. It allows you, and it allows you also to have an organized business where if you want to access credit or you want to partner with foreign people, you can be recognized easily. The moment that you have a limited liability company, it forces you to be more organized. You have to do minutes of meeting. It may be a bit of, trouble, but it's worthwhile trouble. You keep record. You don't need to do audited accounts. Under these new laws, small companies can do just management accounts. Just whatever you put together yourself is good enough. So moving to a limited liability company is something you have to do based on the type of business that you run. If you run a professional, firm as a partnership, if you go and register as a limited liability company, you still won't qualify as a small business for exemption. So it will depend on what you do. But for most businesses, registering as a limited liability company is actually a great idea, not just for the tax savings, for other reasons as well. How does the Office of the Tax Ombud work? So the Office of the Tax Ombud is there to protect taxpayers against abuse of their rights. Like I said, anything they do for you and everything they do for you is free of charge. So these are the benefits. Protection now is on the way for you. How do we identify and address common misinformation about the new tax law? When you see somebody making a video and you look at their credibility, experience, they have not been doing tax video before this new tax reform, right? They were doing other things. Suddenly they pivot, they see people are trying to understand the tax law, they start creating their own content. That's one flag. Chances could be that they don't fully understand what they're saying, especially if you don't have that qualification and experience. Another one is, you see when people are making videos, there's a way you can tell they're adding too many adjusters to it because they want to spice up, their followers. You abuse government here. You try and say, what are they doing with it? They want to kill everybody. When you see those ones, it's emotional. People who are professional and they're giving you credible information, they don't do sentiments, right? They're not praising government and they're not abusing government. They're just speaking to data and facts. And when you watch any content online, try and look for other corroborating sources that are credible, like those ones that I share with you. What are they saying? Can you find the same information from those sources as well? Is fiscal federalism not impacted with the way and manner these taxes will be collected? Who is still collecting our tax? Is it LRS, FRS? A lot of people mislead their followers to say Tinubu will collect their taxes. No, personal income tax in Nigeria is collected by states. So if you are resident in Kano State Internal Revenue Service will collect it. Resident in Ekiti Internal Revenue Service will collect it, and so on and so forth. So this law has not moved the collection power of state to the federal government. Everybody retains their collection power. What this law says is that at every state level, let only the Internal Revenue Service of that state collect taxes, not different agencies collecting it. The same thing at the federal level, let only Nigeria Revenue Service collect taxes, not 60 agencies chasing people trying to collect taxes and levies. How is the average individual expected to calculate their taxes and file returns? I already showed you the calculator that you can use as an average person. The Internal Revenue Service of the state where you live, if they don't already have it, they have simple form that you can do online. Some of it you can do on your phone, like you're trying to fill your name to enter the airport. Very simple and straightforward. How do we address accountability for taxpayer money? Great. We all are concerned about how government spend our money, including myself. So our committee was set up as fiscal policy and tax reform. So which means it's not only tax reform we're doing, but that's the only one that most people know. We have a lot of work we are doing around even amending the constitution to make government more accountable. We have provisions to increase transparency, and these are at different stages. But they are not things you come and be saying on TV and radio and newspaper so that they can clap for you. Because if you upset the policymakers that are supposed to adopt the reform, you get the applause, but no reforms will be done. And you have to make up your mind, what do you really want? Do you want the popularity or do you want the outcome? How will the new tax law affect personal savings and investment? No changes to them, except that the state government bond has now been treated as exempt. Lagos State issued a bond recently. Under the old law, if you bought state government bond, you pay tax. Under the new law, you are exempted. I juggle personal fund and business payment across different bank accounts. How would this affect me? I would advise you, if you're, doing business, separate the bank account from your personal spending. If you mix it up, make sure you have proper record. Otherwise, it makes your explanation harder when the taxman says, we see this amount and we think it's for your business. I say, no, it's not my business. It's my uncle that gave me. So just try and make sure you create a clear distinction. The last one, how and where to access credible sources and guidance for fact-checking tax-related content. Excellent question. So you can see, you need to scan this page. So after today's session, which we're going to end in the next 10 minutes, this QR code will give you access to a folder where we're going to be putting a lot of information, okay? So there's already about 1 or 2 items there already. By the time we are done with this training now, within 30 minutes, these slides will be there in that folder. We will not send you any emails or SMS. On your own, just go to that folder and you will get information from time to time, okay? My message here is that you should only share accurate, balanced, and factual tax information with your followers. Consult credible sources when you are not sure, when you are in doubt. Misinformation spreads fast, so it's tempting. If you want engagement and you want to make some money at the end of the month, just do misinformation and a lot of people will engage. But while that may be to your benefit in the short term, it's to the disadvantage of your audience, which is not the way to build trust. Whereas if you do accurate information, it may travel slower, but it empowers you, you earn lasting trust, and it empowers your followers in the long run. If you want more information, including a copy of the new tax law, the QR code to the left, by the way, you see all this slide in the folder I just told you, so don't worry. This QR code that you have there, okay, you will see the new tax laws. They are in searchable format, which means you can search content in the new tax law, and then you find whether what you are referencing is correct or not. On social media, you can follow us. We have a website, we have email and WhatsApp, we have a WhatsApp channel, we have YouTube account, we have TikTok. These are the areas where you can find a lot of information. So once again, this is the QR code for finding the personal, the folder for useful information for content creators. So let's see, let me stop sharing, or I'll quickly show you the task calculator. So this is the task calculator on our website. If you go there now, I just let's put 500 million naira. 500 million naira. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So somebody is earning 500 million naira in a year. Normally, pension contribution is about 8%, NHF is about, 2.5%. Let's say all their contribution is 10%, which is 50 million. Okay, so they contributed all these 50 million to all these places. Let's calculate the tax now. Look at the tax of somebody earning 500 million naira. Look at their tax rate. Their tax rate is 22%. It's not even up to 23%. That's someone who is earning 500 million naira. You see, so that's why it's not right. If somebody is earning, let's put, somebody is earning 20 million naira. Somebody is earning 20 million naira a year. And let's say that all their contribution is still 10%. So they contributed 2 million. Let's calculate the person's tax. There's even have other deductions that I did not even put there, just to keep it simple. So this person, under the new law, we pay 16%. Okay? See, they pay only 10,000 naira more. 10,000. By the time they even put more deductions, if this person has more deduction like rent, if they get like rent of 500,000, you may even see that 500,000. You see, suddenly they are paying less by 11,000. That's even somebody that earns 20 million naira. If you put minimum wage, 840,000, 840,000. Let's say they don't even contribute anything. Okay. Let's say they work in a company where they don't contribute anything. It just tells you their tax is zero. So this person is saving the money they were paying in tax, 30, like 40K they were paying in tax before. They'll save it under this, 40K a year. For some of us, it look like small amounts of money. For the person earning that amount, that's a lot of money they are paying in tax that they will no longer pay from next year. Okay. So let's see whether we can take about 2 questions. Do we have hands up? Let me see if Secretariat has sent me any questions. We have some hands up. Let's see if we can unmute. I can see Faith. Faith Aminaho. Sorry if I call your name wrongly. Faith, you can speak if you're able to.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, my concern is the small companies exemption. On the Tax Act, we currently have a threshold of 50 million, but like about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, we have about a list of 50 exemptions that is going to be enjoyed in 2026. And that particular bulletin was saying 100 million threshold. So we'd appreciate if we have clarity so there will be no ambiguity.
Thank you. Excellent question, Faith. So you would have heard since yesterday that the lawmaker said that the version that they passed is different from what was gazetted. And people that have been following what we've been doing, I don't even personally have the official version of what the National Assembly passed, but when they were doing the gazetting, there were things I could tell were errors, like this 50 million versus 100 million, because I know that part of our back and forth with the lawmakers is the 100 million, and they eventually agreed to the 100 million. By the time they were gazetting it, one law had the old version of 50 million, another one had 100 million. That's where the confusion is coming from now. It was because of those errors in the gazetting. So, but because we know that 100 million was what National Assembly approved, so we are currently working on a guideline that will say it is 100 million that is intended, right? So that you can ignore the 50 million. That regulation is about being finalized. That's why from our part, we said, let's just try and create clarification for people so that we limit the confusion. That's why in the 50 benefit that you're referring to, we had put 100 million there. So hopefully this process of the National Assembly trying to reconcile different things will help us to a point where we have clarity. We're already working on making note of all those areas where we see errors and changes, Some of them, version 1 is what is there. Some of them is House of Rep version. Some of them is Senate version. We don't even know whether somebody has tampered with anything, but we just know that they were referencing errors in some cases, and we're already making a note of what the lawmakers need to amend. Hopefully, this process is started yesterday will fast track, that correction and reconciliation, and we all can have clarity about this reform going forward. So thank you, Faith.
Thank you.
I'll just take one more person, and you will get this recording also on the QR code that I gave you. That should help for your future reference. Let's take Adedayo Adebisi.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Taiwo, for this opportunity. Okay. So my question majorly is around the rent relief allowance, because there have been a lot of misconception going around with regards to if, for example, I live with my parents, so how do I get my rent relief allowance claimed? Or if, for example, myself and my wife, for example, we both rented the apartment, so how do we share the rent we pay? So I would just like if you can please give more clarity on that side of rent relief allowance. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So if you are not paying rent, like if you are living with your parents, you can't get that relief because it's actually meant to help low-income earners who are trying to survive and they're still paying rent. They're mostly the urban poor. So if you live in your parents' house, you're not entitled to that rent allowance. Don't even attempt to claim it, because if you make false claim, there are penalties. If you live with your spouse, which is the normal thing, and you both pay the rent of where you're living, or a partner or your friend. So if it's your spouse, you can decide who claims it, because if you pay 500,000 naira as rent, you're not likely to get a receipt that is splitting it into two. You get one receipt. So therefore, one of you should decide to claim it. If you need to share the benefits, you can credit yourself, back end. If it's a partner and you have to share it, you have to find a way to convince the landlord to give you separate receipt, because you need the receipt to show that you paid the rent before you can get the relief. So, but I can tell you that the Joint Revenue Board is working on guidelines to make this process very simple, and hopefully that guideline will be out very soon. So we would also try and edit this video, cut out the areas where there are noise or whatever it is, and then put it also on that folder that you have the QR code, so that you can reference this subsequently. So this is where we'll stop for today. Thank you for participating in this educative session. Just to repeat again, we are not asking you to promote the tax reform. We are not asking you to create content for us. If you wanted to create content for us, we'll reach out to you. We haven't paid anyone to create any content for us. We think that this is a national reform that is going to benefit the country. And once people understand it as their own little contribution, they do whatever they can. There was a man who, I said was now, because the man is in his old age, and he already spent 15 million of his money. He interviewed me, converted it to different languages, and then he passed on. So he felt like this is so important for the country, and he was invested in it. So we're not paying people to do anything, because we have nothing to hide. We think this is for our country. Thank you in your own little way. As it comes to your mind, if you want to educate, please educate accurately. If you don't want to educate, have the knowledge for yourself, do the right thing. So for those who have questions that we couldn't answer, we'll answer those questions and put it in the folder that you have. So when you look at the folder, it may not be tomorrow, it might be a couple of days. You will see the answer to all your questions that we could not answer today on this call. They'll be answered subsequently. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Bye for now.